Friends, welcome back to another Pints with Jack Skype session. And this week, as always, I am joined by my dear friend David. David, welcome.
Hello, everyone.
I enjoyed the last one, which was probably many weeks ago from when this was released, of how we didn't have the actual side-by-side because my computer essentially stopped it. I ran out of memory, and you thankfully had the dual recording through Zoom. And so I say hello, except that didn't actually happen. I was like, ooh, cringeworthy. Anyways, this week's going to be a fun one because we're going to pack a lot. Usually it's like a single topic. And this one we're going to honestly bring probably 3 in briefly from the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So if you want to go in depth with that in our podcast, we spent 2 episodes. So as this is released, I think the first one will be going out and then the next one in a few days from this, unpacking that. And as you know, Lewis in Narnia packs a ton of wisdom. Well, this one didn't disappoint again, a lot in it. And what I wanted to do with David today was talk about the 3 big themes that he loves from this book. It doesn't mean these are the only themes, but it's what David and I feel are really powerful. So David, I'm going to let you kick them off because you so brilliantly brought them up and highlighted them in the podcast, and then we'll unpack them one at a time.
Okay, there were 3 scenes that I really enjoyed. The first one was the dragoning and undragoning of Eustace. The second one was Lucy's adventures in the magician's house when she's going through the spell book. And then lastly, Aslan's country, or at least as near to the utter east as you can get before you're in Aslan's country.
So let's start with that undragoning, and I'll kick it off because that really, I hadn't read the book until, 2 days before recording this. Well, I knew of that scene thanks to the C.S. Lewis conference and Jerry Root, and I don't actually believe it made the final cut of my talk, but it was very close to making my talk. I don't remember the one that I did on authenticity in C.S. Lewis, because that scene of Eustace is this character that really annoys you because he's so arrogant, he's super particular, he's obnoxious, no self-awareness, no recognition. Well, he ends up becoming a dragon as he falls asleep on this hoard of treasure. So his inner desires kind of manifest themselves in an outward physical way. And there's a beautiful scene where after he now realizes he is a dragon, he's monstrous, he was the fiend, not the other people. Great moment of self-awareness. Well, eventually he wants to get rid of this. He sees this fountain that he wants to jump into. And he recognizes, Aslan comes and he can't get into the mountain, or the fountain. Sorry, I said mountain, which it was on top of a mountain. And Aslan tells him, you can't as you currently are, but once you undo all of that, like this monstrous part of him. And so what does he try to do, which any of us would have done? Scrape it off of him. And the movie, unfortunately, did not do a great job showing this. But he tries, and it works, and the scales fall off. But then they come back. He tries again, and it was 3 times the same thing happens. And then Aslan says something along the lines of, you can't do it, but I can. And Aslan tears it off from him. And it actually says the first one was the hardest, most painful, when Aslan clawed him and it went into his heart. Because it is, when we surrender to God's grace and he does that unpacking or taking off of our false self, it's painful. So that's the scene. It's so beautiful. False self, true self, authenticity. David, give us some of your thoughts.
You mentioned already, Eustace always had a dragon heart. It was just externalized by magic when he was thinking dragonish thoughts on a dragon's gold. The thing I love about this is it's very sacramental. It shows the outward working of sin, and it also shows its repair. So what Aslan is doing, to the outside, it looks like it's just some superficial ripping off of scales. But as you alluded to, Eustace says, the first cut was so deep, it felt like it went to my heart, because that's always the work that we need.
Yes.
It's not something superficial. We actually need something deeper than that. We need a heart transplant. We need a transformation. And that entire scene is clear allusion to baptism, because Eustace is first of all stripped, and then he's then tossed into the pool, and it stings, but then it's delightful. And this is an externalization of the interior work that has been going on in the preceding days, and ultimately what Aslan achieves for him.
I love how...
But one really important thing, it requires Eustace to let him.
Yes.
So in the book, Eustace goes onto his back into a position of submission, and that's when Aslan gets to work.
And you use
It requires him to be humbled.
And you use the word vulnerability in the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how I just did a podcast saying that, forgetting that we're recording Skype, where in our podcast, David and I, obviously there's no video, it's all audio. And I usually go like this to let them know I got something to say. But what I wanted to say was that's so true, because a lot of times we think grace just covers us like a clear coat of painting that makes us look pretty, but instead it permeates into us and it transforms us from the inside out, and that's painful. And you see that. It's not as if he just made the dragon look good, clawed into the heart of it, untook all of it, and then maybe you didn't say this, but then after he gets in the water, he's also redressed. And so there's also this action of like renewal. It's not just let's take off the bad. It's I'm going to also put onto you who you were truly intended to be. The grace is transformational. I love that image of the clear coat paint versus like a primer, or maybe that's the word.
Marinade.
Yeah, marinade. It goes and seeps into you and transforms you and makes you better. Marinade's a good one. We could say so much.
Christianity is marinade. It's not ketchup.
Yes. Great analogy. And we could say so much more on that, but for the sake of progressing through this, so that was a beautiful scene. Learn a lot of that undressing and then being redressed in Christ. Next scene, Lucy. This one I'm going to let you set the stage for.
So Lucy comes to the magician's house. She is searching through the spell book, looking for the spell to make invisible things visible so she can help the Duffers. And as she's going through, there is a series of spells, 2 in particular, that tempt her. One is a spell which will make her beautiful beyond the lot of mortals. And the other one is to be able to hear what her friends think about her.
It was, you're going to hate this, David, but it was the beautiful one. David likes the book way better than the movie. And he's correct with that. But in here, I appreciate how the movie expanded on this. So in the one where she wants to be seen as beautiful, it's almost as if she doesn't like who she is and wants to become someone different. And there's the movie unpacks it where she wants to be like Susan, because Susan is beautiful and loved and admired. And it shows this scene where it's with her, Edmund, and Peter, except she's as Susan. And Lucy doesn't exist because she's almost, if she's trying to be made beautiful, wishing away who she currently is. And Aslan points out that what would life be like without you? And she has that realization, and he says, know the worth and the value that you bring to this world. Because Narnia would not have happened without Lucy. Because in the scene, she, as she's Susan, quote unquote, she mentions Narnia. And Edmund and Peter are like, what's Narnia? Because without Lucy, there's no Narnia. She discovered Narnia. And I thought that was so profound, that scene. Because how often do we wish we were someone different, not recognizing our value and our worth as we are?
And the movie changed this a little bit, because the spell wasn't so much to make you beautiful. Mm-hmm. It was to make you somebody else. Yes. Which I would say is a little different.
Yep.
And I'm going to say I didn't actually hate it. I actually quite liked the It's a Wonderful Life kind of, well, what would the world look like if I was never here?
Good analogy. What we both agreed on, though, is we wish they would have placed it where it was in the book, not this other thing.
Randomly later, that's stupid. And in the other spell, when she overhears one of her friends basically bad-mouthing her when she's around another girl, because the other girl clearly doesn't like Lucy, I just love the very practical wisdom. I remember reading this as a child and learning this lesson that sometimes when people say nasty things about you, they might not actually mean it. They might just be kind of weak and just want to be popular and not want to stand up for you.
Yes.
And while that's not a good trait to have in a friend, it's more forgivable.
It's the movie Wonder with Augie and Julia Roberts.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, watch it. Julia Roberts, I'm pretty sure it's called Wonder. And he's a very deformed face, and he's one of his closest friends, or he becomes really close friends with, is talking with one of the popular kids that's not as nice, and exact same thing. He overhears him talking about him and essentially belittling Augie, and it destroys Augie. And you later learn in the movie that exact same principle, that it had nothing. He was weak in that moment, and he loves Augie deeply. And so that is a beautiful scene. And now the final, the end. There's so much here. Reap a cheap. Let's get some of your thoughts on the ending.
So they leave Ramandu's island, and the entire quality of the book seems to shift into gear at this point, with light and silence and wonder and dreamlike awe as they come closer and closer to Aslan's country, where the water is sweet and it fills them up so they don't even need food, and the old men start feeling younger, and they're deciding to go on. And Reepicheep has this wonderful little speech where he speaks about how he's going to keep going on the Dawn Treader until it fails him. Then when it fails him, he's going to go in his little boat, his little coracle. And when that fails him, he's going to swim. And if he still hasn't reached Aslan's country, he's going to die with his nose pointing towards Aslan's country. And the entire quality of the book at the end is just ethereal and beautiful. And you see Reepicheep's heart on full display. This is a mouse that is single-minded and utterly determined to, even if he doesn't get to Aslan's country, he's going to pursue it with all his might.
You described it in the podcast, and I didn't even think of this, and it made me like the book more than I even did the first time reading it, or the only time reading it. It's a book about courage. And I said it indirectly without realizing it. You articulated it better. That was the big thing I took away from it. I walked wanting to be like Reepicheep. That scene right there made me cry. And you're not gonna like this again. But then in the book, or in the movie, sorry, at the end, so you get this where you see Reepicheep's courage, and then he's in front of Aslan, which is not in the book, and he's ready to get to Aslan's country. And Aslan says, "My country is made for people with hearts like you." And I actually genuinely teared up in the movie there, because when it comes to sin, temptation, evil, my heart is pathetic. I mean, Reepicheep, I'm 1/10. If I was 1/10 of what Reepicheep, I would be so much better than I am today. How often?
Are you a man or a mouse?
Yeah,
You're a man.
I'm a man.
It's not a good thing.
No, I would rather be the mouse, because there's so often when sin, temptation, even things that we talked about, gossip, or you're saying you're not defending in a circumstance the right thing when we were talking about Lucy earlier. I'm weak in those ways too. I'm like that friend sometimes, and it's terrible. And that scene really, really moved me with Reepicheep.
And it reminded me of the scriptures. I think it's in the Psalms where it says, "You have said, seek his face, your face. My heart seeks your face, O Lord," or something to that effect.
Yes.
That Reepicheep wants more than anything to be in Aslan's country, and this is his quest, and he will not be turned aside. Rather like Orwell, rather like Psyche.
Yes.
In her final descent to the dead, when there are the temptations that try and draw her away, be it the crowd, be it the fox, or be it Orwell, she still continues on into the land of the dead.
And that should be our absolute only desire, to be with God in heaven, to be in perfect communion with him, to see the beatific vision. Like that should drive everything we do. And it doesn't. Well, for me. There are people though on earth that it does, and they're saints, whether known or unknown. So all this is to say, we just packed in 3 big themes here, but this book was beautiful. Glad we were able to do this. I love that we do these in between seasons, and love how you brought to light. I'm not as good at articulating some of these main themes as you are. So I was really glad that you did that in the podcast, and now we were able to just summarize it right here in less than 15 minutes.
Well, I've lived and breathed these books ever since I was 1-year-old. Yeah, I was actually thinking as I was reading this book about how I might decorate my children's rooms with pictures from Pauline Baynes' illustrations of a giant Reepicheep on the wall. Might terrify the child, but I would enjoy it. So that's all that's important.
I wasn't quite thinking that detail, but I was thinking I can't wait to read these to my kids someday.
Yeah, that's why you have to practice the voices now.
Yes, and you've helped me with those. So as we close this, let's toast to Reepicheep in Aslan's country.
To mice and men.
To mice and men. Cheers.